Well, first, let me start off by just thanking you so much for joining us today and, being a part of this and sharing with us your infinite wisdom on, subjects as it relates to pride and rebellion and intersectionality and progress, past and present. We're so appreciative that you're sharing your time and day with us. And I will introduce myself and then I will introduce you and kick it over to you to explain a little bit more about why we're here today. My name is June Johnson. I am the event and social media manager for SAVA. And today SAVA is partnering with PAX for a very special Pride feature that we are previewing the Dennis Peron documentary, which you can view on YouTube for free. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful piece that just really examines how cannabis was legalized and the different efforts. And I won't give too much away of it, but I recommend it. It's 20 minutes. It'll be in the link as well. And today we have John Entwistle Jr. with us, who will be doing a live Q&A as we discuss the topics that I mentioned before. So without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's John Entwistle. Dennis was my spouse, my life partner of, we worked together for approximately 30 years to legalize cannabis. And so I'm an activist as well, going way back. And we go back to the dark ages, before there was the internet, before there was cell phones, right at the beginning of this whole technological, right before there was even beepers, I mean, the very beginning on this, and yet still there was cannabis. Still, there's whole, and that's, and Dennis even goes back further. And that's the why we focus on Dennis so much, because he went back to let's start in 71 when he came back from the Vietnam War as a sergeant. And his first political campaign was the Prop 19 campaign in California, which was an amazing campaign to legalize marijuana. And it got 33% of the popular vote. It got more than 50% of the vote in San Francisco. So as a statewide initiative, no, it didn't win, but It really gave people a lot of learning and a lot of hope. And it's a major thing to do that, to qualify an initiative, right? And to put it through and then to get that. Then he took the results of that and he pushed the local politicians in San Francisco and got them to pass the Moscone Act, which in 1974, or maybe it was 75, I get my years wrong.
Forgivable.
Gives a damn, right? Anyway, they turned it from a felony to a misdemeanor. Major step in marijuana history. You get it? And then at the same time, okay, so let's skip on the pot history, and I'm not going to stay in the 70s very long. But then, Dennis basically was in the Vietnam War. He was radicalized in the Vietnam War because, in war you see society at its worst.
Absolutely.
Right? And in his formative years, seeing society at its worst, he decided that he wanted to work to see society at its best. And he wanted his life to count. He always believed his life would count for something. This is just, you have to have that belief. I don't know where it comes from, but it comes. And he always had that. So he was always working for social change, always living differently, forming communes, collectives, and always selling cannabis, always selling pot. But back then it was underground. You had to not get caught. You had a lot of issues. I won't bore you. We already know a lot of violence. A lot of violence. It was a very, it was a tough walk to walk. Okay. The Harvey Milk campaign was the other big thing. See, and Harvey ran 3 times. And this was a major dream, and it was a huge advance for all gay people everywhere. And one of the key things, among many, was that Harvey was also a marijuana smoker. See? So there's this fusion between the gay culture and the marijuana culture. And there's a lot of commonality between these two cultures. We're both kind of outlaw, from the mainstreams wherever we are.
Right.
And for those 2 reasons, essentially, can get you thrown out of the family. This is a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can cause you a lot of damage. And historically, you've hurt a lot of people, caused them to lose jobs, all kinds of things. Okay, so anyway, the Harvey campaign brought a lot of great people together, a lot more training, a lot of this, and all of which goes into creating Dennis Peron. That's what I'm kind of going at, you see, and the roots of the 2 cultures, you get it? So we had a lot of potheads from the Haight-Ashbury, all these gay guys in the Castro, joined hands and said, this is our guy, and elected Harvey Milk.
Right.
So that created tremendous history. And it's all very local, right? So then we jump forward. Now, when I came out there, so we go forward, and Dennis is doing his thing, and, everybody's trying everywhere we are, but it's very difficult. The mainstream is just not, there's nothing to latch onto. And so, we're trying, but getting nowhere and trying not to get caught.
Right.
Really hard. And so then you get the AIDS epidemic comes in, and suddenly you see a whole new thing. You get it, a whole new chapter. And it's once again, though, on the same set, the same theater, the same stage. It's in the Castro.
Right.
You got 10,000 gay guys living there. Enormous number of people came to that area. And it turns out cannabis is really helping people in the beginning stages of the epidemic a lot. And there was nothing else then. So all of a sudden, the whole focus changes. And the idea, we go where we go. Now, here's what's interesting. What's interesting is this. In the middle of all this, there was a bust. Dennis was selling pot, as he always had. He had his merry crew of people. He was doing a lot of this by satellite at that point. He would have a place set up, and he wouldn't really go there himself. A crew of people would go there. A doorman, a bud tender, or somebody else. A team of people would run the business for a few hours and then close. Okay, I was one of those people when I first moved to San Francisco. And we all got busted. And they kicked me loose early in the game. I was peripheral to it, c'est la vie. They kicked one or two other people loose also. But the issue was this. Dennis, they had him with a quarter pound of pot, and they wanted to throw the book at him for a lot of reasons. And Jonathan walked into the courtroom, and Jonathan West was his lover at the time and his dear friend of many, many years. And Jonathan was on his deathbed and was visibly on his deathbed. And it was a very, very tough thing. And Jonathan went in and testified, to the judge that this was his medicine and Dennis was holding it for him. And that it helped him with his appetite and helped him with the whole deal.
Right.
And the judge bought on that and let it all go.
Wow.
But this had never happened before.
Right.
Never. And it was the truth, and it prevailed in court. It almost broke the first rule of court, is that the truth is inadmissible. Dennis used to call himself a professional defendant. When people say, "What do you do, Dennis?" He'd go, "Oh, I'm a defendant." I swear to God, it was a little inside joke we had, but it was because he'd been in court so many times, 15, 20 times, and always picked up and continued as well, and always beat them, or beat them down at least. He did some time, a couple of times, but that was his life experience. And so when the AIDS epidemic came and we start, doing this thing, and okay, so the whole viewpoint changes. The judge buys on that. Then we're starting to think, well, we got a lot of people. We had a lot of people. It was everywhere. And we're working with Brownie Mary at that point. We're trying to get this out to more people. And it wasn't just Dennis. There's a whole bunch of people. We're right in the middle of the gay community, right in the middle of the Castro. Cleve Jones was starting his his quilt, that beautiful quilt that you've heard so much about. Okay, they unfolded that in Moscone Center and filled the room with it. And it was so beautiful to see all the different life paths that unfortunately ended, but so many life paths, so many visions, so many people doing so many things. It just blew any stereotype you ever had and just threw it out the window.
This is so poignant and so different. And I think the visualization of it forced people to see it in a different way. And I think that's the beauty of art in that capacity,
Gilbert Baker was part of the team. Gilbert, who invented the rainbow flag. He was a seamstress. Gilbert just loved fabrics. And he was a very smart man, extremely smart guy, very driven, very hardworking, and super creative. And he just loved color, loved fabrics, loved designing things. And that's what he did all his life. But he was right there with us. And there were other guys that passed away. Earl Galvin, Bob Basker, all these great gay men. And many I'm not, flashing to on the top of my head right now. All sitting around the kitchen table, all in the middle of this epidemic. We're trying to help everybody we can around us. People are dying, and we're doing everything we can, and it's not enough. And that's where the idea of, we just won this court case. were, blown away by this. So the idea of let's take it to the next level. Let's start a club, get busted for sales of medical, and take the whole question of selling pot medically and get a judge to say it's okay. That was the plan. And that's what led to Prop 215, to the initiative, and everything else. Basically, we tried to pick a fight with the cops, and we stopped. Like I was telling you earlier, up until then, we'd always been running, right, and always been hiding. And there were good reason to continue. People were still doing that. And then when we saw that court case, and when that judge changed his mind, and not only that, but we were there. We were seeing it every day. This was no lie. It was no fantasy. It was the absolute truth. And we didn't think
all this, like this is the reason that you're doing all this, is because there is so much truth to this. So
right. So here's the funny thing now, and I'm glad to stop there for a second, because here's what's funny. Like I told you, I did work for Dennis originally in that first case, but in a couple of years ago, maybe a year or two had gone by now. And part of the thing is that because court cases take a while and everything, takes forever. And one of the things is that personally, I've always been an activist. It doesn't, I like to throw events and organize events and things and gatherings and propaganda, speak to the press, all this stuff. And and confront the cops directly. And you can't do that if you're selling pot, not underground, not if you don't want to get caught. It's just, and when you do get to them, you have to be able to look them in the eye and say, look, I'm not selling pot. I'm going to argue with you about this. I'm here to give you a hard time, but after I leave here, I'm not even going to jaywalk.
Right. You have to be squeaky clean at that point.
You got it. I accept my fate. I will not cross you guys, and I will not take the money from those guys.
Right.
And I'm going to be in the middle here. And, maybe I can survive this, and that was always my dream. And I enjoyed that. And that played a very valuable role. And Dennis and I really, I would go down to the police commission and attend the meetings and listen very acutely. And we all did what we could and address those guys on the topic. And Dennis had a police bullet in his leg, and he had he'd been in jail. So he had some biases that were a little hard to overcome. Like I said, and he was dealing.
Yeah.
So, it was better if we could split the division of labor up a little bit right at the beginning there. And so that was the thing. I wasn't dealing at all. And Dennis was doing it all by satellite. He would never go to his own club. Only his very closest friends would he sell pot to personally. Basically, he wasn't selling pot. He was, it was all his business, but it was by satellite. And that's what's so different about this. Then, one day when we saw all this, we figured it out. We're struggling over the question. We're doing deliveries. We're walking to people's hospitals, and it was taking too long. And that's what we were struggling with. We could only get it out to a few people a day, and it felt so awful. And, so we had to do something to get the sales thing rolling. And we figured sales is the way to go. Let all the storekeepers sell pot legally. Everybody that sells pot, let them do it now. Unleash the power of the marketplace and solve the problem. Easy. And so that's what impelled us to do it. He said, John, go to my store and convert it. Let's do this. We tried an act in the basement and they didn't fall for that. And we had 300 people call us on the phone the next week and say, where's that thing I saw on TV?
So there's clearly a need. There's clearly a response that's positive and asking you.
So we said, send them to our club. Where's the club, Dennis? It's around the corner on Ford Street. Go over there at 1 o'clock tomorrow. They'll be there. Tell them there's a new deal. And that's where the Cannabis Club started.
Wow.
Yeah. You see.
History.
And that's why I was talking about Dennis's history there. It's so important to know, the people and the story behind this, where this came from.
And I think you touched on some beautiful points that are, they make sense today too, which is that everyone has a role in progressing things. There's movement and a lane for everyone to get in to contribute as an activist. As I talk to friends right now, friends are at different stages of being active about everything that's going on right now with Black Lives Matter and police brutality and stuff like that. And there's a lot of talk and discussion about, well, how do I help? What's the best way to be an activist? But as you said yourself, there's so many ways, there's so many ways to get involved, and there really is a place and space for everyone. And I love that you mentioned that too.
There's a book somebody wrote, Rules for Radicals. Just a great book. Saul Alinsky was the man's name, and many people, old left, anybody my age, like, oh, Saul Alinsky, yeah, he's the guy. But I picked it up as a young guy because rules for radicals. That's crazy, right? No, it was all practical organizing.
I'll have to check that out. That seems like right up my alley.
Yeah, and we want to always remember this. And here's the thing: as we grew as a club, we changed the goal, since obviously we weren't going to get our court case, and what we decided to do was put it on television and let people tell their own stories. Okay, so this put us on a different path. We grew very large. We grew to 8,000 people. We had a 5-story building in San Francisco, where Dolan Law Firm is now. We had that entire building, right? And but there's a different challenge when you do that. As I explained to you earlier, that blew us up. In the old days, it was just 3 of us could run Dennis's underground operation out of a small apartment 4 hours a day. Now we had a 5-story building, 30,000 square feet, 8,000 people, of which, several hundred a day were going to show up. And we had to have 30 people to open the doors. So as I said earlier, that put us with a 90 to 100 people on volunteer basis. We had long lists of volunteers. And we were very careful about that. We realized as we grew, that we wanted all kinds of folks. It was an opportunity to bring in a whole patchwork of people. And it was really great. It really was a good thing to do. And that's something that, as I was saying earlier, the industry really wants to continue with. We want to see that continue down the line where, when you walk into a cannabis club, you see people that look like you do, look like you and me and everybody, not just a bunch of young people selected, but from the general fabric of society.
Yeah.
And we always found a real strength in that, multiculturalism, different sexualities, different genders, different ages. We had very old people. We had very, younger people. We had people in wheelchairs.
I think that's beautiful because intersectionality is, I think, how we move forward progressively. We make it the fabric and the foundation, and we move forward through that. And so hearing that this started off with that intention and seeded it is really beautiful to hear. And it's also inspiring because it lets us create the same kind of framework today, and we can advocate for that today.
Okay, 2 points real quick.
Yeah.
First would be the idea that as we go forward, we need to expand and go international. Like I was saying earlier, we want to see your products in Japan. We want to see this thing going all over the world so we can be importing from countries that have summer at different times than we do. You get it? And we've got it. And also on the more at home today, there's still states that don't even have it. And there's still people that are still doing disproportionate sentences, and no industry benefits when their consumers or people associated with them are in jail.
Right, exactly. It just re-solidifies the stigma. So, and also just as far as what's morally right, the fact that so many predominantly Black and brown people are sitting in prison for helping carve out this industry, while this industry grows and becomes profitable, there's an imbalance there we have to address too. And so absolutely agree in terms of like getting people out of prison for nonviolent offenses, making it international, making it easy and accessible,
Yeah, all of that. And then there's our gay roots. Now, this is really important for a lot of reasons. Like I said to you before, one of the reasons that Harvey Milk was elected was because of marijuana smokers. This was a very beautiful thing where potheads and gay people came together, and we're natural constituencies. And then on it comes back, and all of a sudden gay people turned out to be the muscles and the brains and the real powerful network that went on. It was the backbone of a bigger network that went on and changed state law and started the whole thing, started something that created this whole industry. Which, and it's a really good thing. It's so great when you go through the airport with an ounce of pot and you don't have to hide it. And they find something in your bag and they're looking and they pull your pipe out and all this stuff but they don't even care. They're looking for, the dog food. Yeah. Okay. The ounce of pot. No, we know an ounce of pot. We're not interested in that. We know what that looks like.
Definitely a different day in that way, isn't it?
Man, we used to have to hide that stuff. We have to spoof them, spread it out in little amounts all over it was a fucking nightmare.
Even until recently, I had a friend who in high school was driving down to spring break and got busted with an ounce. And he was busted by a sheriff, and the sheriff made him sign up for the military unless he wanted to go to prison for trafficking. And so he showed up at his graduation and made him sign over, and he's been in the military ever since.
That's
and
just madness.
Altered his life completely, and so I think of stories like that and these, like specific cases, but then on the larger scale of how this is really affecting people and tearing up lives, and it has to change. It has to change.
That's right. That's right. Now, here's an interesting thing. Dennis passed away a couple of years ago. And as his spouse, I've been trying to use his name for good purposes and celebrate his name and his legacy. And one of the normal ways to do that would be to start a foundation and all of that. And eventually, I believe that will happen. But the fact of life is that Dennis was never the kind of guy that liked to ask for money. He didn't believe in it. And he's right. Money is a two-way sword. It's a great thing. You need it. I'm not knocking it.
You're also beholden to it when you ask someone from it.
Exactly. But if you think money is the key to political change, you're straight up wrong. It is not. Never will be, never was. And Dennis always kept his eye on that, never believed it. He always saw it as, he just didn't like it.
Yeah.
So to honor him in that way, it's just very difficult. But money does come in. There's a lot of money being made in our industry now. Some groups are doing very well and have been very vocal about that as well. And it's been nice. It's been great. Like, for example, the guys at PAX, they came up with a brilliant product, and a lot of people love that product, and it's making they're a great team, and they're making enough money that they can contribute to things that they believe in.
Yeah.
And they've given a whole bunch of money to the Gay Lesbian Historical Society in San Francisco with the earmark that is to commemorate Dennis Peron. But it also supports that group, which is also holding the historical archives for Gilbert Baker and Jose Sarria, and some very, very, and they're really a together super great group of people doing work that absolutely needs to be done right now. And as potheads, we're going to need to do that too for our pothead history.
Absolutely.
Because we got to, it's funny. One day you're struggling to exist. Next minute you're so big, you're bigger than Marlboro.
Yeah. And that transition is very difficult.
Yeah. But then eventually you want to come back and remember where you started and do a little museum somewhere to say, and nobody can remember. So that's where we're at with the gay history. We want to make sure it all gets preserved. These great life stories get held. They have great voice recordings of Dennis that they were able to go get for the movie from the archive. See, and then just recently the Weed Maps guys, I think they've done fairly well in the cannabis field in terms of making some money. They also just recently, just a couple of days ago, they've put it on there. They're doing a whole thing to send money down to the Gay Lesbian Historical Society in San Francisco as well. Okay. And I'm thinking now, I'm leaning on everybody. You get it? That's kind of my angle of doing it. I'm looking at the bigger guys. That feller Burner that fills the Fillmore, does the Fillmore East wrapper, or thing. He does cookies on hate, and I'm sure it's not a good month, considering they just looted one of his stores or something, but next month he'll be on his feet again, and I want to see him give money to this too. Anybody that's got it out there ought to be donating to this ought to be one of our charities, and we should build this thing up big.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've been so impressed by over the past couple of weeks is being put on to different organizations, primarily grassroots organizations, Black, Indigenous, intergenerational, gay and queer, lesbian organizations, and I'm seeing attention go to them like I haven't previously. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because I think there's so many organizations in this space that are doing wonderful, needed and necessary work, preservation of history, expunging records, getting people information so they have the right education to understand cannabis even better, and I see all of these different pockets working together in this huge system, and it's really beautiful.
La lucha continua, as we used to say back when we were squatters in the Lower East Side in New York City. La lucha continua. Somebody had written it huge letters on the wall, and it just burned itself into my head.
That's beautiful.
The struggle continues.
Yeah.
And it does, we're still, everything teaches you something. Yeah. I'm working with homeless people today, and I go back to those days when we were grabbing buildings from the city and building staircases. you know, chasing out the junkies.
Yeah, I think you've said so many beautiful things, and I'd love to ask you, where do you feel the progress goes from here? What do you feel is needed in order to continue the effort of Dennis and continue the effort of people who have really given their life to move this forward?
Yeah, we can get lost in sophistry. We could get lost in debating medical versus recreational, or this versus that, or whatever. But the reality is it's a great thing, and it helps a lot of people in many, many ways. It's a good product, and ultimately, it ought to be available to the greatest number of people. And, so we're looking at a future where distribution has a long ways to go. The price point has to go down. You get it? We need a product that you can afford, just like tobacco.
Absolutely.
So I see a future for our industry that really resembles tobacco much more than anything else. And internationally, things are changing. At the United Nations, and this is great because they are very glacial. They're super slow. This is the United Nations, for crying out loud.
Right.
It doesn't get slower. Well, for the last 10 years, they have been working to reverse the UN Single Convention. UN Resolution 232, I believe that's the correct number. You might want to check on that, but I'm sure it's right. And anyway, it's the one it's a very important convention. It goes back to the 70s, to the whole drug war era. And it's the reason that the hippie trail closed down. It's the reason all these countries passed anti-pot laws. So it's a big deal. And you've got to get it off.
On that, yeah.
It tied basically your access to pharmaceuticals and other drugs and other things to having these laws on the books and enforcing them to some extent, and harassing somebody for pot somewhere for some dumb reason. And it created a lot of nightmares across the whole planet.
Yeah.
Now we want to start growing and distributing cannabis across the planet. So we certainly have to erase that dumb law.
And time. I feel like part of what makes me so agitated sometimes is, the immediacy of it. You want it to be immediate. That's how progress, feels.
We are impatient.
But the fact that the UN is taking this time, it will take time, because it's like once you change those things, you still have to change the perception. There's still residual people who are enacting that. And so I think time is also a big key in progress too. But I think it's important to rush things, because that is how you move things ahead. If you wait around, then it goes even slower,
Yeah, we were discussing earlier. See, it's like the pendulum. For a while there, it was a felony and it was really bad. And then we kind of got it down to, misdemeanor. And then it got pretty bad again. And then we came up with the medical thing and pushed it all the way back again, way up there, just wide open for a number of years. Then it rolled back, and under 64, it's legal, but it's very tightly controlled, very heavily taxed, very, very strongly regulated. And that's not necessarily a very good model. I mean, for anything. And it's particularly not the safest drug known to man. And so now we got to see that pendulum roll back and take some of that stuff out of there. I think everybody likes access to a good, pure product, but whether it needs to be done in that manner or not is extremely debatable.
Yeah,
I would say
there's absolutely room for improvement. And I think more people are working on how to improve that logistically, and within a certain time space too,
Right. That red tape isn't helping anybody. And even the age thing where we have 21 instead of 18, well, that only creates a black market. That only creates a big problem. It just creates a nightmare, and there's no real reason for it. It's not a good idea. Yeah. And so what you want to do is come up with something that just creates a legal market, producing a high quality product at a super low price that, everybody that needs it and wants it can get it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you destigmatize it and you normalize it, and then you take it international. You get it? Because we have knowledge in this country that we've advanced, and products that we've made that we could actually send abroad all over the world. Brands that we are creating that people are going to want. Yeah.
I mean, we just on the customer service side, we get inundated with requests from people asking us to ship it internationally, to ship it to states that it's not legal, so there's there's the need, there's the request, there's the awareness. And so matching that with law and with distribution will, I feel, be the really big next step for cannabis moving global.
Federal law.
Yes.
US federal law. It has to change, and it will change. So the nice thing about being right, you get it, how it will change, who will do it, for what reason, we don't know.
Right.
But it will change.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're at time, and I know that I could talk to you for so much longer because it's a joy. Yeah. But I just want to say thank you again so much for sharing your insights with us and your history and everything. It's been a privilege and a pleasure.
A half hour went by pretty fast there.
Very quickly. I knew it would.
June, it's a real privilege and a pleasure to meet you and to be able to spend some time and to speak. And thank you very much for having me in your kitchen here.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me virtually. I'm glad everything worked out tech-wise. And I just wanted to say again, thank you to PAX. And on behalf of Slava, we are doing a special with them right now for Pride, where PAX Bloom Pods are 20% off. And it comes in a very beautiful and special pouch. And proceeds are being donated. So I'll wrap up that and put information on our Instagram, but support, show love, share. Happy Pride, everyone. And thank you again, John.
All right. Thank you, June.
Have a good one.
Turn off, leave.